Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to the Page Layouts Workshop. To go over the agenda for today's workshop, we'll first do a quick review of the different topics we've been talking about in relation to content strategy so we can see how everything is building off of each other. Then we'll get into what the steps are going to be to create an effective and relevant page for your users. And there's really 3 steps to doing this. The first being figuring out what the page intent is. Then we'll move on to creating a page outline, and finally selecting blocks and building the page. I'll then go over some tips to keep in mind when building out your pages, as well as go over an example of a page and dissect where you can see these concepts being applied. After the example, you'll have an opportunity to complete an activity where you can create your own page based off of the concepts covered today. Then I'll end with a review of some of the key points we talked about. Of course, if you have any questions about the content covered in this workshop, feel free to email us at webservices@georgetown.edu. Alright, so like I said, I first wanted to do a quick review about the different concepts we've been talking about lately. So remember, the first step when trying to work on content strategy should be to set goals for your site, as this is going to act as the foundation for every other step in this process. So it's really important to make sure you're setting those website goals so you have a clear purpose and idea of what your site should look like, the kind of content it should have, and what you want your users to accomplish while on it. The next step would then be to take the time to really understand what it is your users are looking for and what their needs, frustrations are. Your users' needs should really be what's guiding the kind of content you develop, so it's important to understand what they are looking for. And you can identify your users' needs, goals, and frustrations by conducting user research through things like user interviews, and then creating user personas and scenarios to better understand them. You'll then want to make sure you're reviewing the content that you currently have. This way, you can see if there's any content that needs to be updated because it's either outdated, repetitive, or maybe isn't relevant enough to your users and their needs. Then, you want to think about information architecture and your site navigation. It's important to think about how your content is structured, organized, and how your content relates to each other. But once you've considered all of these steps, you're going to take the concepts you've learned from them and apply them to the 3 stages of page creation. By understanding your website's goals and your users' needs, you'll be able to successfully identify a clear intent for your page. By conducting these content inventories and audits, you'll be able to identify gaps in information you need to fill with the page and then apply these page layout concepts when creating them. And with information architecture, you'll have a better idea of the relationship your pages have with each other, so you'll be able to better identify opportunities to link to other pages when creating them. So moving on to the first step when it comes to creating page layouts, and this is going to be about setting a clear intent and goal for your page. The page intent is going to help you decide what kind of content you want to use, how you want to organize that content, and how you want to present it. So to help you get you thinking about what your page intent can be, consider the following questions. What do I hope to convey to my users? What information do you want your users to understand? What feelings or emotions do you want your users to experience? Or what actions do you want your users to take after viewing the page? If you're unsure about the answers to these questions, think about your website goals and what you want your users to accomplish while on the site. Maybe one of your goals is to get prospective students to apply to your program, so you might want to showcase the program achievements, convey a sense of urgency with a deadline, have users apply after reading the page, or create an intriguing experience for your users. It's important to keep your page intent clear by keeping it simple. You don't want to have too many goals for one page because then the intent could become convoluted. On the other hand, you're also going to want to consider your users' perspectives with questions like, where are your users coming to this page and what information do they want to get out of the page? It's important to mix your department's goals with your users' needs so you can create a page that will help you achieve your website goals and still be relevant and useful to your users. The next step is then going to be to think about creating your page outline. And in this step, you're going to want to think about the most important pieces of content and think about how you can use these to help convey your page intent. When looking at these major pieces of content, consider how you want your users to progress from one piece to the next, and make sure it makes sense to how your users would organize this information. Depending on your page intent, you might want to develop a narrative flow and set up a story that draws your audience in. So if your site is for a program and your page intent is to build interest, you might want to consider your user's experience in the program and note what sets your program apart. You can do this by using student testimonials or giving a glimpse of the daily life of a student in that program. These methods of storytelling can help your users envision themselves in the program and see if it's a right fit for them. On the other hand, if your page intent is more to inform about a certain topic, it's important to avoid large walls of text when thinking about the outline. And sometimes you really do have a lot to say. So in these situations, it's important to avoid a big wall of text and think about the page outline in terms of trying to break up the text into different sections by using headings, subheadings, navigational aids, and even throwing in some white space when it's appropriate. Anchor links are a great way to help make navigating longer pages easier, and they're also good for SEO. To summarize, when thinking about your page outline, think about how you can break your content into sections and arrange those sections to create a logical progression of one piece of content to the next. Moving on now to the last step, which consists of picking out blocks and actually putting your content in those blocks to build the page. When thinking about which blocks you want to use, it's important to again think about the page intent. Different blocks can convey different emotions, encourage different actions, and highlight different bits of information. So if your page intent is more along the lines of trying to convey a certain feeling or emotion, images are a great way to go. You can use blocks like the image block, the media and text block, and the image overlay card deck. When you're selecting these images for these blocks or a featured image for your site, make sure you're selecting high quality images that fit your page's message. For example, if you're looking to convey a sense of belonging and you're talking about the student experience, add pictures that show camaraderie between peers and students. The Georgetown Photo Shelter account is a great resource to find a variety of high-quality pictures if you don't have any handy. To access this account, simply go to georgetown.photoshelter.com and log in with your GU Net ID and password. If your page intent is more action-based, consider adding things like the media and text block, a call to action card deck, or a call out. Or maybe you want to highlight an accomplishment, faculty, or students. If this is something that you're wanting to do, consider using blocks like the stats block, the profile or profile card deck block, the quote block, or the news block. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed and aren't sure which blocks to use, think about your page intent and what you want to convey to your users. Then, take it slow and think about your page outline. Take it one section at a time and just try to get something started. You can always rearrange blocks and swap them out if you find it makes more sense for your users a different way. So now I wanted to give some tips and talk about best practices to keep in mind when you're creating your pages. And the first of this being, keep your page intent in mind during all the steps that you're taking in this process. This is going to ensure your users are receiving a clear message and that the page will align with your users' needs and your goals for your website. The next tip is to keep it simple. If you remember from the information architecture workshop, we briefly talked about information overload. Too much information on one page can be overwhelming for some users, so it's important to break up larger pages and also limit call to actions to 1 to 2 per page so that the intent is clear. Another tip is to make sure pages are easily scannable. When searching for information, most users look to headings and subheadings to quickly see if the topic they are looking for is covered. So make it easy for your users and use smaller paragraph blocks and headings. In this image, I wanted to show an example of an informational page that is using headings, subheadings, and lists to break up information so it's easily scannable. Another tip to keep in mind is to create visual balance and symmetry by alternating alignment. You can see a great example in the image where you see that they are alternating the alignment of the student profiles from right to left. Another tip is to get familiar with the available blocks we have. If you have time, experiment on our training site with different block combinations and page layouts. Another tip is to maintain consistency across page layouts and the language that you're using. A great way to do this is by creating reusable blocks. For example, say you're a program site and you want to include a program application deadline on multiple pages. This is typically done by using a callout block with the deadline information inside of a solid callout block. So to do this, you would create the callout block, fill out the appropriate information, and then convert this block into a reusable block. Then all you would have to do is add that reusable block to all the other pages you want that information on. This ensures consistency in language and the visual look of the block, and it also saves you a bunch of time. Another tip is to make sure you're validating your page layouts. You can do this by getting internal feedback from your colleagues and external feedback from your users by conducting user research and from tools like Google Analytics. Now, before we get into the activity, I wanted to go over an example page with you all. So this is a page I've created on the training site, so you can feel free to visit this page whenever you'd like. And for this page, the intent I chose was to give an introduction to a program and guide users to information on more specific topics that are relevant to them. And so because I just wanted to give a brief introduction to some information and then mainly guide users to more specific content, I chose to create a landing page. So you can see I've used a landing page template here and added a featured image. With landing pages, if there's a specific bit of information you want to highlight, like a brief program description or maybe information on your mission or value, you can add that here in the landing page header. You can also link to a page or post or external link here. As we're scrolling down, you can see that I added a place for a brief message about the program or department description. The next piece of content that I wanted to put was information about the director or the program coordinator. I put this first because I think that this is one of the more important parts of the program. You can see here that I only included parts of the welcome letter from the director. This is because I'm keeping the page intent in mind. This is a landing page, so I'm not going to overcrowd the page with a bunch of content on the specific note. Instead, I included a link where users can read more about the welcome letter if that's something they're looking for. Then, I chose to use an image overlay card deck to link users to different topics. I chose the image overlay card deck since I'm assuming users are not familiar with the site since this is an About Us page. So I wanted them to be able to make an easy visual connection in regards to what the page topics are going to be. So over here, for topics on the undergraduate programs, I chose a picture of undergraduate students together. For the graduate program link, I chose to include a picture of graduate students. For the page on faculty and leadership, I included a picture of faculty. I then added our mission statement on a solid callout block. The reason I chose to use a solid callout block was to bring visual attention to this, as I think it's important. You can then see that I added the core values here using headings and paragraph blocks. I could have just added these using a wall of text, but I wanted to make it easy and digestible for the users, so I decided to break it up using headings and small paragraphs. If you've noticed, I've actually added spaces in between a couple of different blocks, just so that things seem a little bit less crowded. You can see exactly where I'm adding the spacer blocks by editing the page and looking at the editor view. Now let's get into the activity and have you create a page using the concepts we covered today. I put together a variety of pre-made content for a fictional program at Georgetown, and I want you to pick and choose from these pieces of content, put them into blocks, and create a page. You can complete this activity on the training site. And if you don't have access to the site, send us an email at webservices@georgetown.edu and we'll go ahead and grant you access. So for this activity, you can choose between two different intents. The first being a more informational intent, such as a page like an application process page, a curriculum page, or a visiting or contact us page. The second option is to create a page that encourages an action. And this can be an action like applying to the program, signing up for a newsletter, or attending an event. So feel free to pick which intent you want to go for and then make sure you get specific with it and only pick one bulleted item so we don't confuse or overwhelm the user. If you find that you're missing bits of content to successfully convey your page intent, feel free to add or change some of the things around when creating your pages. I've also gone ahead and created a general user persona for this example so you can see what your users' goals, needs, and challenges could be. While it might seem silly creating a page for a fictional program, creating a page with content you're unfamiliar with will help you focus more on the why behind the intent, the outline, and the blocks that you're choosing. We'd love to see what you've created, so send us an email with a link to your page if you're looking for feedback. With the activity completed, let's review some of the key points we covered. We first reviewed some of the content strategy principles like setting website goals, understanding your users and their needs, the importance of updating and reviewing your content, as well as information architecture, and how all these concepts are going to help you in creating successful page layouts. We then talked about the different steps to create an effective page layout. The first one being page intent. So this means always keeping your page intent in mind, thinking about what your users are looking for from you, what actions, emotions, or feelings you want your users to experience, and how your users are approaching the page. The next step we talked about was creating your page outline. So thinking about your user's progression through the content of the page, developing a narrative flow to create a story that draws your audience in, and breaking up your content into different sections by using headings, lists, and smaller paragraphs. The last step was to then select the right blocks and start building the page. So we talked about selecting blocks with a purpose, and the purpose would be to convey your page intent, and thinking about which blocks you can use to convey certain emotions, encourage actions, or highlight information and accomplishments. With all that being said, this concludes the page layouts workshop. If you have any questions on any of the content covered today, please feel free to email us at webservices@georgetown.edu or view our content strategy section on the documentation site. Thank you for listening.